Hey, everybody, it's Julie from Fundamentals Physio Therapy and Wellness Clinic, and it is Wednesday, and I remember that it's Wednesday now. Now, what numeric day? I'm not 100% sure. 22nd, Mike says. It's the 22nd. Hope everybody's having a good week, and that work's going okay, family life is going okay. So this evening, welcome to our mobility Facebook Live, basically where I am showing you how I do some of my virtual assessments and the types of tests that I do, so that I can see and understand how you move or how you don't move. So tonight I have recruited Mike again. That's 2 times in a week where he has agreed to be my guinea pig. So we're going to kind of go through some tests that I usually do at the clinic on our virtual assessment so that we can see how he moves. So let's bring him over.
Hi everybody, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so when I assess somebody virtually, depending on what they're complaining of, we look at a couple of different things. So I'm going to go through about 6 different tests, and I call them functional tests. But how you move and how you do them tells me a lot. I can break down basically how you're moving, how things are functioning, what's moving, what's not. Same as what we talked about last Wednesday when we talked about flexibility, mobility, strength, and stability. So I kind of wrote on the board here what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing some squats, some balance tests, some range of motion tests, and just kind of see how he's moving. So I'm going to take you through it. So here he is. I'm going to pretend he's my patient. And make sure this doesn't fall over. Okay, so the first test, let's say somebody has low back pain or mid back pain or hip pain. The first test one of the main tests that I do is basic squat. We're gonna break down how he squats. So we're gonna do an overhead squat. So Mike, arms overhead, I want you to keep your arms in line with your ears. Yeah. And you're gonna squat down, shoulder width apart. Good, and then come back up. So when you watch him, he's able to keep his arms in line with his ears, but what you're noticing is that his chest is coming forward. Good, come down again. He's getting decent range of motion of his ankles. However, I would like his knees to come over his toes a bit more. So that's kind of probably indicating that he might have some restrictions in his ankle range of motion. Coming down again. Now, because his chest is coming forward, I have a good guess that he probably has some tight hip flexors here, and then come back up. Good, and again. And because he is actually coming a little bit forward, so I'm guessing he's got a bit of restrictions in his thoracic spine extension as well. Good, and then come down. So from that one test, I'm able to decipher he probably has limited ankle mobility, some hip range of motion issues, which I would say probably pretty significant, as well as some thoracic spine restrictions. So now we're gonna go on to our balance test. So he is going to face you, and all I'm gonna ask him to do is balance on one leg. Now, what I'm looking at when he's balancing on one leg is the level of his hips. If his hips stay nice and level, that's indicative that he's got some pretty decent glute strength, because when he's balancing on this leg, he needs strength here. Try the other leg. Now here I'm starting to see like a tiny bit of a drop on this side, so I'm a little concerned with over here. Good. Okay, Mike, can you do a one-legged squat for me? Nice and slow. Good, and back up. So what I'm looking for here is making sure that he's able to maintain a neutral pelvis on the way down. I'm looking to see if he has any dropping, but then I'm also looking at the control of his knee. Your knee is basically a joint that needs a lot of stability, okay? Mobility up in the hip and mobility up in the ankle. So can you try that again for me, Mike? Good. See how he has a little bit of an inward rotation on this knee, so his thigh is going inwards? Now what I have to determine is that inward rotation because of lack of strength up in his hip, or is it because of his ankle? So try that again on the same side, Mike. So when he squats in, the knee does come in, but he also pronates on his foot. So he's starting to get this inward rotation of his foot, which tells me that he has a little bit of control issues in the arch of his foot. Try the right side again, Mike. And that one's even worse. So with the right one, you saw that knee draw inwards again, and same thing, the foot drew in, which we call pronation, as well as the knee started to draw inwards. What should be happening is that the knee should be maintaining in line with either the first or the second toe on the squat. Okay, so try again, Mike. This time I want you to think about keeping the knee in line with the first and the second toe. Not easy. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little thoracic assessment as well. So Mike, you're gonna head over to the wall. So thoracic range of motion is really, really key and crucial with anybody who has neck, shoulder, or low back issues. So what I'm going to get him to do, I'm doing a thoracic rotation test with him. His right side is entirely against the wall and he's in a staggered stance, right leg back a bit more, Mike. He has to maintain full contact with the wall with his knee, his hip, and his right arm. So what I want you to do, Mike, is rotate towards the right and see if you can hit that wall. Good. Just shy of it, eh?
Yeah.
Try again. Rotate, 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 rotate. Good. So he's got a little over 3/4. Now you're going to try the other direction. So right knee stays in contact with the ground, the foot stays in contact, as well as the right arm. Now you good. Keep that knee and that foot in contact with the wall. Don't let that knee come off the wall. So as soon as he keeps that contact with the wall with his right knee, he's significantly stiffer. So his left rotation is significantly stiffer than his right. So that flags that we need to work on thoracic mobility as well. Okay, now what you remember, if you remember from his squat, what did we say so far? We said his overhead, ability to hold ahead of the bar overhead, I put a guess on it that he was probably slightly stiff in his thoracic spine. That just proved that he was. So that's things that we would work on. The other thing that we noticed with your squat, ankle range of motion and hip. Okay, so his overhead squat, I was putting my money on the fact that he probably has tight hips. So we are gonna do 2 little tests to check his hips. Now, the first test that we're gonna be doing is a modified Thomas test. And this is testing basically these muscles in the front aspect of his hip. So when he brings this right knee up to his chest, it's causing a little bit of a posterior rotation of the pelvis. And what you're gonna see, can you see how his leg lifts up off the floor? Now, Mike, if you slowly bring that down a bit and he releases the pelvis just a little bit, his leg goes down farther. Bring it back up, Mike. See that lift? That's indicative of a tight hip flexor. Usually it's his iliopsoas, basically two muscles that are in the anterior aspect of the hip, and they go through the abdominal wall and attach to the vertebrae behind the back. So now he's gonna switch to the other side. And do you see here? See that distance? I don't like that. If he lowers this down a tiny bit, the leg starts to go flatter and you start to see less. Pull it back up, Mike. See that leg buckle? So he has restrictions in his anterior hip flexors on both sides, okay? And I put my money on it when I watched his squat. Do you remember when he squatted and his chest came forward? So his hip flexor was really tight that he wasn't able to stay upright and keep that thoracic spine and that lumbar spine upright. He had to flex forward. Okay, my next favorite test is our hip 90-90 test. So what a hip 90-90 test is you are getting into a 90-degree angle, okay, of the front leg with the foot coming outwards, and then a 90-degree angle with the back leg coming backwards, okay? What this is checking is your external rotation of the front hip. Okay, so the ability of your femoral head, that thigh bone, to rotate inwards. The back leg is assessing the internal rotation. Now, if you have good range of motion, you can stay nice and upright. If you don't, you can't go upright. So Mike, can you sit upright?
No.
Where do you feel most of the restriction?
Right here in the side of my leg.
Okay, so he's really stiff on that right hip and lacking some internal rotation. Good. Now, can you switch to the other side? So 90 degrees on this side, 90 degrees there, and are you able to sit up nice and tall there?
Better, but it's still probably extremely poor form.
Okay, and where do you feel that one?
Lower back.
Yeah.
And here as well.
Okay, so he's also restricted on internal rotation there, and same thing. Your hip joint cannot move 100%. Remember what we talked about last Wednesday? If you have reduced flexibility in certain muscles, so for him, maybe his hip flexors, maybe his piriformis, all the muscles that surround that hip joint, you can't have full mobility of the hips. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people may just have, maybe their hip joints are structured a little bit differently. We all have different hip joints, and your left hip may be different. Lost network connection. If you are noticing restrictions, the key is trying to improve upon them and seeing if you can see a change. Okay. So we have one more test that I wasn't going to do, but we are actually going to do it. So I'm going to get you to lay down on your back, Mike. So we're going to do a bridge, and not the kind of bridge that you did when you were a kid. Remember when you were a kid, you laid on your back and you lifted your bum and you put your hands over your head, and then you did like a 360 backwards? Yeah, no, we can't do that anymore. So Mike is going to do a bridge. So scoot up a bit more, Mike. Yeah. So with a bridge test, what we're going to do is feet are shoulder width apart. Heels are tucked into our bum. I'm going to ask if he can squeeze his bum cheeks and lift up. Now, is that as high as you can go? Now, what I see a lot of is a lot of people with low back pain tend to arch their back when I ask them to do this, even though I've just asked them to lift their hips. If they arch their back, it's very indicative in showing that they overuse and overcompensate with their back. Now, with Mike, if you can see this, his body isn't quite in line. He's actually you see how it's not completely flat? He's actually got this little angle in through here. That makes sense because do you remember when we did that modified Thomas test when he brought one knee up to his chest and he couldn't quite straighten out that leg? So he has a really hard time getting what we would call his end range hip extension. Okay? End range hip extension is really, really, really important. And people say, well, why? If you don't have full mobility of your hip, you can't have full function of your muscle. Okay, so his muscle and his glutes, even though they're probably burning right now, are only working maybe 80% of their capacity because they can't get to that end range extension. Now, Mike, can you lift up, come back down? Now we're gonna just try a little one-legged test, okay? So you're gonna bridge up again, Mike. Yeah, now let's straighten out this leg. What we look for in a one-legged test is the ability of the pelvis to stay nice and neutral, but he's dropping down on that opposite side already. So instead of staying like this, he's starting to do this. What is that indicative of? A weak glute. Okay? Good job, bud.
Thanks.
So, after my assessment with Mike, we did basically, first test that we did was a squat test. Thanks, Alicia. Mike did a great job. So the first test that we did was a functional squat, functional overhead squat. The functional overhead squat gave me a basic idea of exactly what I wanted to look at when I assessed him. So first thing, keep that hockey stick overhead. That gave me a little hint. Okay, maybe thoracic spine stuff. So I did a thoracic spine specific test. What did I find? He was stiff in one direction and not the other direction. The overhead squat, he hinged forward. He couldn't stay upright completely. What did I guess that was happening with that? Tight hip flexors. When we did the hip flexor test, what did we find? Tight hip flexors. We didn't do an ankle test. I'd still put money on the fact that he had stiff ankles, but that's basically what we're looking for. So if any of you have trouble squatting, kneeling, grabbing something out of the car when you're driving with your kids, if you put something on the floor, what our functional testing are doing is basically looking at how you move, the quality of your movement, okay? Are you moving properly? Are you compensating? A lot of our injuries are because of compensations. We're lacking somewhere and we're making up for it somewhere else. Yes, saying yes, 100%. So lack of flexibility. If muscles are tight that cross a joint, if they're stiff, you don't have full mobility within that joint or possibly the surrounding joint. So they're very interrelated. And then, like I said, with Mike's bridge, the fact that he couldn't bridge all the way up, that showed that he had tight hip flexors, lack of hip extension, so he couldn't completely recruit his glutes. And when I asked him to do one leg glute, he did not like that. So take the opportunity, pay attention to how you move. Don't just rely on those pain receptors that you're having, low back pain, hip pain. Pay attention to how you move. Okay? Because usually when we are suffering in pain, if you cut your finger, you run it underwater, you put a Band-Aid on it, the pain's gone. It's kind of like you hurt yourself and then an end result. With pain, sometimes if we don't actually get to that source of the pain, those pain receptors are still signaling because something is wrong. So listen to your body. Pay attention to how you move. Because if you're in pain or having symptoms or having discomforts, it's telling you there's something going on. Give us the opportunity to take a look at you. Let us do some functional tests with you. See how you move. How do you squat? How do you bend? How do you twist? You'd be surprised what we find. Now, anybody out there have any aches, pains, or notice that they're really stiff in certain areas? If you are, put it in the comments section. Let's see who has a stiff back, who has stiff hips, who knows somebody that's really stiff and could really benefit from kind of like a functional mobility standpoint. I know he does. And I do. Everybody does. I have a stiff mid back, but I found out that most of the time it's because of my breathing patterns. So I've been working on my breathing patterns and it's improving. Yeah, we got some people with upper back issues, shoulders, hip, low backs. That's a lot. Yes, your hips. Hips are tough. Hips, there's so much involved in hips. And neck, yes, neck. Sitting at a computer is not easy, that's for sure. Remember, if you're sitting for long periods of time, 30-minute break every 30 minutes. Get up and move. Our bodies aren't meant to stay in one position for too long. So take the opportunity over the next week. Pay attention to how you move. How you pick something up, how you squat down. Can you stay upright? Do you bend forward? When you're going up and down stairs, do you feel like your pelvis stays nice and level? Do you feel like you kind of drop on one side versus the other side? Pay attention to your body. Like I said before, if you're having symptoms with respect to something, it's telling you there's something going on. Take that opportunity. Let one of us take a look at you. Virtual assessments are there. They're awesome. They're amazing. 45 to 60 minutes of your time. Usually covered, 99% of insurance providers are covering them. So if you have a concern and you even want to know whether or not a virtual assessment is right for you, feel free to give us a call at the clinic. You can ask to talk to any of our clinicians and they'll call you back in the comfort of your own home and in the comfort of their own home. Shoulder issue right there, Naomi. Yes, shoulders. Shoulders have a big impact on our bodies, and thoracic movement, big impact on your shoulders. So give our clinic a call. You can talk to one of our providers at any time. The number is 576-5065, or you can message us and one of us will get back to you guys as soon as possible. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at fun_physio, and continue to follow our Facebook Lives that we are hosting weekly. Stay tuned for the next one on Friday night.